Welcome to the Ben Wood Johnson podcast. You can visit Dr. Johnson's blog at benwoodpost.com. Dr. Johnson's works can be found at drbenwoodjohnson.com. You can also support Dr. Johnson on Patreon, the link to which is in the description. Hey, welcome to the Ben Wood Johnson podcast. Today is June 22nd, 2020. This is podcast number 49. I am excited to have you with us one more time to have another podcast. Today we're going to have a peculiar podcast because we're going to talk about a subject that is sort of been on the lips of almost everybody in the world over the last few weeks, and this is the subject of racism. Now, we have talked about racism in previous podcasts. We have sort of debated the subject, but today we're going to sort of take a different angle. There is a concept known as anti-racism that is sort of going around. It is somewhat contagious because everybody's repeating it. It's like it's cool to be an anti-racist. What I found out is that most of the people who are talking about anti-racism do not know what the term really means, or they don't understand, they don't fully grasp the implications of this concept. So in this podcast, which is part of a series of several podcasts that I'm going to post about police brutality, racism in America, and inequality as a whole, but in this particular entry, we're going to talk about the fallacy of the term anti-racism and the danger that it poses for America as a whole. So without further ado, let us delve right into it. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I have decided to record this podcast. And the reason I decided to record this podcast is because I think something very dangerous is happening in America. It is dangerous because some of the folks who are advocating for that idea do not seem to understand the implications of that understanding. In this case, I am referring to the concept of anti-racism. Now, I didn't intend to record a podcast at this point. I was waiting sometimes in July to start a new season, but I think it is important to sort of come out of my shell and to make that statement. Of course, I have been sort of on Twitter trying to make sense of the discussion and try to put in my 2 cents in terms of what I think is going on in America. Now, let me backtrack a little bit to sort of give you a background as to where I am coming from, okay? Now, America is a divisive country by nature. And when I say America is a divisive country, I don't want to sort of put America into a particular category, suggesting that only America is divisive. I think most countries, if not all countries, are divisive, and to the extent that there are always going to be people with different viewpoints, worldviews, if not, about the world, about their country, about where things should go, how things should be, and so on and so forth. So, but America is the prime example in the world as far as divisiveness is concerned, because although on the surface there seemed to be a sort of delineation as to who's what and who thinks what, fundamentally there's something unique about America. But most people don't understand the uniqueness of America. Now, when I say uniqueness of America, what I'm referring to is this idea that America as an entity is sort of an enduring puzzle. to the extent that it is a country that has something far beyond understandings about the world, far beyond views about how things should be, and so on and so forth. So despite the fact that America is a divisive country, but there's something underlining that, and perhaps that's what has kept this country together over the last however years that this country has been around. But lately, America has been drifting into a sort of a dichotomy. It's been bifurcating to the extent that there are certain people who hold certain views, and they are willing to do anything to sort of insert that view onto others, or to force the world, at least to force everybody else to see the world from their viewpoint. And I think it is dangerous when you are arguing against something that's wrong in society, and the solution you propose is something that is equally wrong. Then you're not proposing a solution. You're asking to replace a problem by another problem. Okay? And that's precisely what the term anti-racism does. Because what that term does is that and which I doubt that people would do, but if people were to apply that term to the extent that it is understood and explained, then the country would be even more divisive than the way it is right now. We would all agree, and I think even those who might be considered zealous racist would agree that, there's a problem in America. Okay? Now, the origin, the cause, or the roots of the problem could be the subject of debate, right? But we would all agree that there's something wrong with this country, especially with the way black people are treated. Of course, we could have another debate about black immigrants, which is the category which I fall. But as far as black people are concerned in America, there is a problem. The whole society seems structured with the intent of purposefully excluding these people. And the police, at least the way it's been over the last few decades, the police have been drifted towards more punitive rather than protection. Okay? So yeah, there is a problem that needs to be fixed. Racism is real. And I, as a black person, as a black immigrant, I couldn't stand here and deny racism in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I am living racism in my bone. Racism has destroyed my life. For the last 5 years, I've been sort of reeling. So I know racism. I've lived it. So I know what racism is. But there's something that I know as well. Racism is not necessarily an individual problem. Whenever we look at racism as an individual problem, we miss the point. We don't understand what the problem really is. Because you see, everybody is a racist, or everybody has the potential to be a racist. But their actions would not affect the other so long as the societal environment facilitates that. So when we're talking about racism, we have to understand that it is always going to be there. It is always going to exist. The only thing we can do is to come up with laws. We've come up with social mechanisms that allow us to take care of the problem to the extent that it is not as pervasive as it is right now. Jesus says, if you have never committed a sin, then be the first one to throw the rock. And that's what we're seeing here. Like people who are racist in their core, who have done racism, are sort of putting themselves as the vanguard of racism. But what they're talking about, what they're preaching, is somewhat making racism even much more pervasive, because what they're doing now is that the notion of anti-racism takes away the power of racism from one group to put it in the hands of another. And this is equally wrong. If we think we need to fix racism in America, or in the world for that matter, the solution is not to tell people to become race vigilantes. The concept of anti-racist, and at least the way people understand it, because I think the worldview of this concept that I've been hearing is this idea that you have to be against those who are racist. Now, the question is, how do you determine when somebody is a racist? What is racism then? Okay? So what makes him a racist and not you? So what makes John a racist and not Jonas? What makes Carol a racist and not Caitlin? What makes one different from the other? Well, absolutely none. Okay? And that is why racism in and of itself has a subjective aspect to it. Okay? Because individually, we are racist. We are not without sins. If we're going to look at racism as a sin, we have to understand that we are all guilty of it to one extent or another, right? But this idea of being an anti-racist creates the possibility for more divisiveness in American society. What do you think is going to happen? If people were to sort of be anti-racist as they are asked to be anti-racist, do you think what would happen to society? Like, black people would start calling people out for being racist for things that might not have been, to the extent that the person who did it didn't intend to do it that way. Because there's a subjectivity, there's a subjective nature of the concept. Okay? There are certain things that you do to one person may or might be considered racist, but the person didn't intend it to be that way. Okay? So I think that's what the problem is, because you are creating race vigilantes, and I think this is going to contribute to the divisiveness of society as a whole. This is not what America needs right now. America needs unity. Okay? America needs humility. People need to understand that we are people. We do things that hurt one another. We say things that hurt one another. And when that happens, we have to have a mechanism to solve that. See, right now, racism is not acknowledged as a problem. And I think that's where we need to begin. We need to create a mechanism that makes racism a problem. We have to have a clear definition as to what is racism. Which conduct we are going to agree as a society to label as racist. And when those conducts, when somebody engages in those conducts, then we can say, okay, that was defined as racist, and you engage in that conduct. Therefore, there are laws, there are rules that are going to apply to sort of punish the individual within the context of what the individual did. So until we look at racism from this angle, everything we're saying is division. We're just creating a divisive society. Okay? And I don't think that's the right approach. I do not think that is the right approach to a problem that is so important. I think we need to be careful. And this idea that we have to sort of chase racists, be anti-racist, right? And this idea, it's a fallacy in and of itself, because what it does, it empowers people to do evil in the name of good. That's what it does. What do you think is going to happen when people start accusing each other of being racist? Do you people think that the white population in America are going to sit back and let you sort of turn them into pariahs? Is that what you think is going to happen? They're going to fight back. Right now, they can't fight back because things are sort of raw. So some people sort of taking it back. Okay, that's what's going on. But the problem is not going to be solved if this is the approach we are taking. I think we need to be careful. We have an opportunity to fix a problem, or at least not entirely, but we have a possibility to alleviate a problem that has damaged so many lives for so many years in America or around the world. We have an opportunity to resolve an issue that has plagued this country for so many years. And one of the biggest problems of racism is because people tend not to acknowledge racism. And people don't acknowledge racism because it's embarrassing. When you call somebody a racist, it's embarrassing. Okay? So we have to be careful. And the idea that you have to call out your friends when they are racist, that's not the way society works. That is not the way society works. If we're going to come up with a solution to a problem, let's do it in an orderly fashion. Let's have laws. Let's have rules. Let's define behaviors or conducts that are racist. Let us all agree as a society that this conduct is racist. That conduct is racist. Let's do something great for the world, because we can right now. America can be a leader. It's on this issue right now. Let us come up with laws, rules, regulations that are sort of specific enough to define which conduct that we as a society consider racist. Once we agree on those conducts, then let's codify them. Let's codify them. And once they're codified, anyone caught doing that, anyone caught being that way, then we can go after that person. And it's going to be an orderly process. If a black person applies for a job, he is qualified for the job. He doesn't even get an interview. Then let's say, okay, that's racism. Let's say, yeah, that's racism. Of course, we have had laws like that before. We have passed so many legislations about discrimination and whatnot, okay? But these laws are not specific enough. Let us establish certain criteria, saying if this happened, that happens, then this is what that is. Let's do it like that. So the idea of being anti-racist is a divisive rhetoric. It's a divisive tool. And I am sure liberals are going to like it. Liberals are going to like that idea. But conservatives are going to pull back. Does that mean conservatives are racist and liberals are not? Is that what that means? Now look in the history of America. See who the racist is. Or see who the racists are. Or at least who has been behaved as racist. Look at the history of America. Republicans are racist and Democrats are not. But look around. Go back in your history book and find out who did what to America, or at least to Black America. You'll find out that both of them have done things to Black Americans that could be considered racist. Both Democrats and Republicans, both liberals and conservatives are guilty. We're all sinners on this. It's everywhere. Black people have done it to black people. You know, it's not a white-black thing. So we have an opportunity to fix an important problem. Let us be realistic about it. Let us not go crazy and keep repeating a slogan, let's be anti-racist. Now they're having this anti-baby racist. Right? Don't do this to our generations. Don't do this to our children. Let us be realistic. Let us keep our head high on this one. Let us stay strong and resolute. Let's know what we're doing. We have an opportunity to change that society. Let's not squander this opportunity with feel-good notions, with vigilante attitudes. You want to be anti-something, but don't be anti-society. Yes, you can be anti-racist. You can be an anti-racist, but that's for you to be. That's not for me to know. That's for you to be, that's not for me to know. The idea of asking people to be anti-racist is a divisive tool. I don't know why they're doing it. I don't know if it's ignorance. I don't know what that is. If you believe in this notion, then you don't understand what racism is. You don't know what racism is. Because for you to be anti-racist, you would have to be anti-yourself. Because you are racist. You have done something at some point in your life that somebody could say, hey, that was racist, brother. That was racist, sister. How many things have we done to each other? How many things have we done to each other as black people that another black man looks at like, wait, that was racist, brother. That was racist, sister. We probably didn't call it that way. But the idea that we are going to become race vigilantes It is going to contribute to the divisiveness of America. And we're going to squander an opportunity to fix an important problem. I don't think Martin Luther King would have asked anyone to be anti-racist. I don't think so. I don't think Malcolm X would have asked anybody to be an anti-racist. I don't think Medgar Evers would have asked anybody. None of those icons in the civil rights movement, I don't think any of them would have asked for this. Okay? Right now, America does not need anti-racist. America needs laws, legislations, rules, procedures that govern certain interactions between certain groups of people. Because for too long, some people have taken advantage of the beast within to treat the other with impunity. For too long. Because the guy who wears a badge as a police officer, he has a right to act like a monster. And society applauds. No, we need to stop that. But that does not necessarily mean that we are for racism. We need to have laws. We need to have rules that establish how we should interact with one another. And if a conduct falls within a particular parameter, it falls within a defined understanding, we can take actions against that individual. And justice will be served. I'm not the kind of person who believe in a society that sort of takes away individual freedom. I don't believe in that. In fact, I believe in individual freedom. I believe the individual must be free to choose, free to be, free to exist. But what we're doing right now is not freedom. What we're doing right now is insanity. Right now, at least most people believe in this notion because they've been repeating it in your head. They've been playing it on TV. Of course, they have a political angle. Pay attention to what they're saying because there's a political angle. But we have to be rational to the extent that we can. The idea of anti-racism is bad for America. It's bad for the future. This is not going to solve the problem. It is going to antagonize a group of people. And we're going to squander. We're going to lose the opportunity to fix a very important problem in American society. And if we were to let that opportunity slip by, pass by, we would only have ourselves to blame. And if I'm alive, whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I am going to point out all of those who have been echoing that nonsense.